Welcome back, Strong Lungs fans. This is the episode where Fango fights the most scariest Lunerboonie in Strong Lungs. And I mean the most scariest one, the Dark Auras. And you will learn the different towers. And so the buildings that these Dark Auras are is we got a house, or the property that they're based off. I mean, of course, one's a building, but we got the house and the building and the skyscraper, and we got the cathedral and storage tank and observations tower, the Space Needle type observations tower. We got the cooling tower, the chimney, the communications tower, the electric pylon, the wind turbine, and the clock tower, and the airport control tower, and Capitol building, and the water tower, and the lighthouse. Then did I mention the cooling tower and chimney? Because I don't remember. Anyway, this episode opens at Sid the Rainbow's house, and then we zoom into the window of his house, into his room, and we see Sid sleeping, and it's nighttime, and there ain't no background music playing yet, not until a strong force of wind blows open Sid's window, and he hears this sound. After Sid, that's it, and the sound wakes up Sid, and that's when the background music starts, and we get mystery type of background music, and Sid gasps and says, "What was that?" Yeah, he looks out the window to see what the sound was. It wakes him up and scares him. He gets unsettled. He's trying to figure out what just made that sound. Sorry about that. Anyway, Lecter, the book, shows up, and he yells at Sid through the window, and then Sid says, "Oh hey, did you hear that sound too?" And Lecter says, "Yeah, that's what I was gonna... Yeah, it went off after the wind blew open my window." Sid said, "Yeah, it blew open mine too, and then I heard the sound." Yeah, same. They tell each other that the wind just like blew open their window, and then the sound went off. And then Boley shows up, and he says, "Did you guys hear a strange sound?" And then they look down, you see Boley. They tell Boley, they say, "Yeah, we did." Boley says, "I heard it too." Harold the Hippo says, "What's going on? I just heard a strange sound." He says, "We did too. I don't know what it was, but it was strange." He says, "I know." And it was, yeah. And then that's when we cut to Fango still asleep, and he wakes up. And then we hear the sound again, and then this time it wakes up Fango. He says, and then Bully, and then Sid says, "Whoa, there it is again!" And then when he looks up, he says, "Whoa, there's no stars in the sky!" Yeah, he looks up and sees that there's no stars in the sky. And the moon isn't out either. And Harold looks up and he's like, "Whoa! The sky was just blank." Yeah, like that. It was scary, and Fango showed up. He said, "What's going on?" And then Hacker wakes up and rushes to Fango. He tells him that the dream gate opened. He says, "Fango, something just came through the dream gate." Fango says, "Then that must have been why I heard that sound." And Sid says, "Not only did you hear it, we heard it too." Fango says, "Really?" hacker says it landed somewhere in the forest. And then at Sid's house. And then Fango, that's when they come across a strange structure. He gets in his mecha suit, and this mecha suit, Fango's driving. Yeah, we cut to the forest with Fango. We see Fango show up in one of his mecha suits. This one, has like a skeleton head, and it's got green eyes. It's just, yeah, remember, don't give them red eyes or else they don't look good. Well, maybe some may. Well, we don't want them to look evil. I just gotta give them like good color eyes, like the color of being good. We make it, and then it does good thing. Yeah, it's got green eyes, and then it shows up, and then that's when we cut to the mecha suit, like walking up to this big structure. Looks like it's a really big like stone. It's like this huge stone that has hieroglyphics all over it. It's like hieroglyphics of different like structures. It's like got pictures of like property, like yeah, it's got pictures of like buildings and houses and towers all over it, and bridges and like all sorts of that stuff. And they're like, what is this? So strange, isn't it? And yeah, this is the part where Fango, yeah, he gets a closer look at the stone. Yeah. Also, there's actually some dark auras that I haven't made. I should probably make like a silo, like barn dark aura and silo, or grain bin dark aura. Like grain bin silo dark aura. Well, I can put her on when I get a chance to. I'll show you what the stone they're in looks like. And then suddenly, that's when we see that him and Alfred, Fango and Alfred and Boldy and Sid and Limey and of course Spoonie and Crawley. They go inside. Yeah, that's when Limey discovers a button on the structure. Well, hold on. I was supposed to show you what the structure looks like. So yeah, this is when we see Limey open. He presses a button on the structure. Oh, wait. Why am I still forgetting to show you the structure? Hold on. So here's what the structure that the dark auras are. This is what it looks like, and that's when Limey's clone, presses a button. Well, he just sees it, his friends, and then that's when Fango tells, or like that's when we see Boldy say, "Wait, Limey, don't press that. It could be a trap." And then Limey says, "Hey, okay, I'll step back as I do it. Here, I got like a little swing shot." And then he does that. He's got like a pretty strong and pretty like thick swing shot, and then he just presses the button with a rock by shooting it with a swing shot. Once it hits it, that's when we see it open. But it does nothing but opens a door. And yeah, we see a secret door. It opens like, the first door opens like a garage door, and then the second one opens like an elevator door, and we got like a door that opens like this one, whatever this door is called, and then the fourth door opens like a normal door, like kind of like a bedroom door, or like entrance to a house, and it opens up, and then that's when you see this is like whoop, and then on the other side of all those doors we see a tunnel shaped like a pill, or like shaped like this. Yeah, this is what people calls a capsule. I learned. Yeah, people said, yeah, I don't know what it's called, but it's shaped like a capsule. I say this is like a racetrack shaped tunnel, and then they go through it. Alfred hears strange. Before he goes in, he hears strange sounds on the inside of the structure by putting his whatever, like, heart listening tool on it, but he doesn't. He hears scary sounds like, ooh, oh boy, we hear scary sounds in the tunnel as the strong lung slowly enters. Fango just waits out in his mecha suit while we see Limey and Boldy and Elford and Sid go inside the tunnel. Yeah, we don't see anything yet, but they're just walking through the tunnel. They got a light with them, and they're looking around. It's really dark, and they can't. Then they have at least somebody, or I don't know what to say. Well, Sid, Limey, and Elford and Boldy are exploring the structure on the inside. You see, that's when we see a glowing blue face that screams and scares them out of the tunnel. And they tell Fango, then they get on Fango's hand, and then they run away. And that's when Fango takes off. Once they returned home, the next day, they were trying to recover from what happened last night. When Fango gets up to see, when Fango gets back in his mecha suit one day, because the next day, we cut to the time card after Fango leaves this giant structure. Yeah, the camera stays on the giant structure while we see Fango and the other guys leave. And then we cut to a time card, and then we cut to them at home in the daytime, and then that's when we see Sid trying to recover from what happened last night. And then all of a sudden, when Sid looks at the ground, I mean not the ground, but Sid is minding his own business, watching TV. Yeah. He suddenly hears a strange sound. What was that? Sid asked. But yeah, when Sid hears the sound again, he's like, what was that? He said, was that the same sound I heard yesterday? At least it wasn't the loud hornish sound, or the loud trumpet, deep trumpet sound. It was like that same low frequency sound, same one that I heard after the the power went out last night, and right before I discovered that big structure. But that's not the only shocking thing we know. You'll see what comes next when Fango says, he calls him on the phone. Then he hears a sound that sounds like this. And then Fango asks Sid if he suddenly calls Sid on the phone. He asks, did you hear that sound? Fango asked, and then Sid replies, he says, yeah. It's scary, isn't it? Yeah. Now Fango told Sid that he's gonna go back and check on the large structure in the forest. But by the time Fango arrives, he's shocked because he sees that the structure is now a pile of rocks and boulders. Like, it's because he sees that it's destroyed. And this is what it looks like. It looks like this. Yeah, you see, now it's just like a big pile of gravel. And then after that, Fang was like, yeah, the structure that he discovered last night is now just a pile of rocks and gravel like this. You know? Anyway, yeah. He tells Sid that the stone that is now a pile of gravel, and Sid's like, what? No way! Yep, it's crazy. Can you believe it? Nope. You certainly can't. And then, yeah, Fango couldn't believe what he was seeing either. He was just like, wow, this is crazy. And that's when, and then Fango suddenly leaves. After Fango got home, after finding the structure turned into a pile like that, he returned home. Oh, or did I just say he returned home after, or let me rephrase. After he saw the pile, like the structure turned into a pile like that, he returned home. And then and then we cut to him, and then we cut, and then it says, and then he tells, and then he runs to tell the governor that there's something very strange going on. And then that's when we say, and then let's say this happened at like noon, and that's when we get a time card that says maybe like 18 hours later, or maybe let's say like 16 hours later. We say 16 hours later, and that's when the sun starts to set. Or I don't know if that's when sunset is. Let me check. Okay, I learned it's like 5 hours and 26 minutes, noon from sunset. So yeah, that's when we get to, let's say it says 5 hours later, not 16, because I think saying 18 and maybe it was this one, maybe it was a different episode. I should have said maybe 5 hours later. And then that's when Fango realized that he looks around, realizing that the dark auras are, yeah, well, not the dark auras. He doesn't discover them yet. As you can see in the picture, I just added the other two dark auras. And you see, one's a barn and one's a silo, and the silo one can even become a grain bin silo. And yeah. And then that's when we see the sun's beginning to set. And that's when we see that's when we hear a sound. That's suddenly when Fango gets back in his mecha suit. Yeah. While Fango was outside. Well, not outside. No, while Fango was looking for some sign of the large structure that he found. That's when we hear this sound. That's when Fango turned around to see what made the sound. He realized it was the same sound that he heard last night. It was the same sound that blew open Sid's window and Lecter's window. at their house. And then suddenly, Fango. Yeah. That's when we hear another unsettling sound. And suddenly that's when Fango, that's when we see the dark auras rise from the ground right behind Fango. And you hear them make another sound, like this. When Fango heard another strange sound like that, it wasn't the sirens they were making, it was that other, another strange trumpet sound. It's a lot more scary. Yeah, the other one's a lot scarier than the one they made to get Fango's attention. And when Fango hears the sound, he turns around, and then all of a sudden, he's shocked. He says, and then the dark auras, they and then suddenly, sorry about that, Fango begins to fight. That's when the music turns to the battle theme. And that's when first Fango, they both glare at each other. And then when that's when they attack. Or let's say before they fight, they glare. The dark auras grabs Fango, but then, or maybe they don't grab him, they kick him, and then Fango turns around. That's when they glare, and then he attacks back. He says, "You're gonna pay for this." And that's when he realized what's actually making the sound, and it's the dark auras. It looked like, turns out, they are crazy as heck. But then suddenly, two more shows up. That's when these two girls, one's a grain bin, and one's a warehouse dark aura. And the fight gets a lot more harder than that. When Fango fights with them for this one won't last long. Fango's the first thing he does is he fights back. Then they run into a big rocky tower. And then when they fight their way, he didn't realize that. He saw the dark aura suddenly grab he saw that one grabbed a house. He thought it was one of the houses from the neighborhood, but turns out it was a bomb in disguise, and it blew up on him. He saw that each dark aura had a bomb of a type of structure. There was so many of them, he couldn't even stop all of them. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 14 and 18 and 20. There was 20 of them. There was 20 dark auras. He couldn't get them all, but was he lucky enough to... He knocked them into each other. He tied them. He suddenly used his skeleton mecha suit. He chained them into a line. And he pulled them and he trapped them. And he and suddenly and then he chains them all up together, but they tried to break free, but the chain's too strong. He chains them all together because and then the chain, and he changed them, and then suddenly he puts them underneath the rocky tower, and then he kicks it. Yeah, they do fight for a few moments. The bombs destroys quite a lot of structures. Like there's like a few buildings and cars, and including the left turn signal water towers gets destroyed. And then they throw more bombs at him, and like more proper T-shaped bombs, and he ducks. There's a lot of like house bombs, building bombs, skyscraper bombs, lighthouse bombs, water tower bombs, and capitol building bombs, and cell tower bombs, and electric pylon bombs, and clock tower bombs, and wind turbine bombs, and barn bombs, and yeah, like the building, like this is a barn you see on a farm, and you see a silo bomb, and you see a cooling tower bomb, and a cathedral bomb, and a chimney bomb, and a storage tank bomb, and then you see the warehouse bomb, and you see the grain bin bomb. There was also a lot of airport control tower bombs that Fango attacked, that the Dark Auras threw at Fango. But that's when Fango, now here's what would be cool if the bombs, like each bomb hit all the structures, like each one of all the structures that the Dark Auras were based off of. Or maybe, well, first they build a whole city, but then all the buildings, they just throw a whole bunch of the bombs at Fango, but then they just end up building a city out of bombs. An explosive city. And like, yeah, they're on Fango, yeah. They go past Fango. He keeps like dodging, ducking, and jumping over the bombs. And after they stop throwing them at him, you can see that they built a city out of their bombs. And then the big city that they built right next to Green Ridge suddenly explodes. And then it makes like and that's when we see, and then it was just crazy. Some of the debris hit Fango's robot, but at least it didn't damage it too much. That's when the Dark Auras suddenly decides they use their hands, but that's when Fango uses his weapons. Yeah. That was until Fango and here's the part where Fango chains them in together. He handcuffs one to another, handcuffs one to another, and then one to another, and one to another, and one to another, and one to another, until he handcuffs the one before the last one to the last one. And then all the Dark Auras were just stuck because they were all handcuffed together. They all fell back. And then that's when Fango dragged them to a rocky tower. And then he knocks the tower onto them, crushing them. Or let's say he throws them at the tower, but they end up in a line. And that's when, and then they start like, they turn into like, they roll up together, and they all roll up, and then they hit the tower, and then they unfold, they unroll. It's kind of like a rug being like unrolled, or whatever it's called. Like they unroll it, and then they come, and now they're all into a line again, and then that's when the big rocky pillar or tower lands on them and crushes them all in 1 second. And then they all explode. And that's when we see all their debris go flying. That's when the explosion, their debris goes anywhere, like everywhere. And then they make their last dark aura sound before suddenly exploding. Sorry for the curse there, but yeah, after they make their they make their last words, they explode. And then their debris goes everywhere. Their debris lands and crushes a bunch of cars. Some of it hits, some smashed into buildings. Some buildings got knocked over. We see one smash into transmissions towers, and we see a few knock over, and then parts of the debris hits the left turn signal water towers. We also see some of their debris land in the huge river next to Green Ridge. The Green Ridge. Yeah, we call it the Green, or we'll just call it the Purple River. Well, not Purple River. I'll come up with a name for the river that goes through Green Ridge. We could call it the Strong Longs River. Yeah, the Strong Long River. They end up landing there. Some of their debris ends up landing in the river, while some of their debris ends up destroying parts of Strong Longs. And some of their debris hit a few airplanes. We see like one of the Dark Aura's arms knock a wing off in a passenger airplane. And then we see one of their legs crush a car. We see one of the another Dark Aura arm knock over one of the left turn signal water towers. Before we see that, we see another arm crush a car. Then we see another Dark Aura arm knock over a left turn signal water tower. We see a Dark Aura leg land on the power, snap the power lines, and then knocks over the pylons. And then we see one of the Dark Aura's heads land on the governor's statue and crush it. Fango says, "Whoops!" And then the governor gets angry at the Dark Aura, even though she's already dead. Because then their face just disappeared. Then their face just completely turns off, because they were robots. Their face is just completely blank. There's no, their eyes and their mouths turns off, because they're dead. And then the governor kicks the Dark Aura head that crushed his statue. He just beats the living snot out of it. He says, "Ugh." And then once he gives it the last punch and kick, and then that's when he says, "That's what you get for destroying my statue, you mean old Dark Aura." And then that's when Fango realized what he has done. He says, "Sorry, my bad." And then Fango said, and then the governor says, "It isn't your fault, Fango. It's this Dark Aura's fault." And then he sits, and then Fango just returns home, and then the next day we see him get his reward. He says, "Yeah, even though my statue got destroyed, Fango still deserves a reward." We see the mayor coming up to Fango's house after the time card that says the next day. Yeah, after we cut to that, because after we see the Dark Auras get defeated and their body part debris scattered all over the town, and then we cut to the time card that says the next day, and that's when we cut to the mayor coming up to Fango's house. He says, "Even though my statue was destroyed, I say Fango still deserves a reward." And then he gives the reward, and then Fango says, "Oh hey, thank you." and then he says, "You're welcome." And then he says, then he gets another reward. And then he says, and then all his friends says, "Good job, Fango." He says, "I knew I could do it." And then the episode ends after he says. And then they say, hip hip hooray! And then after they say that, the episode ends.